Chapter 138, The Master of the Qin Hall. Jiang Xuning went back to her room, washed and sleep bed. I thought that after doing such a big thing, I would toss and turn at night and think crankily and couldn't sleep. Who would have thought? I had drunk a lot of wine on the table. Huadiao was not very strong, but after drinking too much, the stamina was not small. Her head was just dipping her head on the pillow, and after thinking about Zhang Sha for a while, she fell asleep deeply. I just didn't sleep very well. I had a strange dream all night. But as soon as I woke up in the morning, I forgot about it when I opened my eyes. On the table was still the small seal of the green jade she had placed yesterday. The seal is still white when bought, and you have to engrave whatever you want. It doesn't take much time to carve a surface like this, but it takes a lot of brains to figure out how to carve it. Jiang Xuning glanced at it and didn't move it for the time being, but just pushed open the window and looked out. The snow has stopped. No wonder I feel a little cold in the morning. She stretched and yawned a few times, and after a while, she saw Xiao Bao walking over in thick clothes on the Yang road outside the window, and said to her, "Second girl, the news just came, said that after the snow stopped in the second half of the night yesterday, the collapsed mountain road was cleared for most of the night, and the road has been opened this morning." Seeing that the sun was going to come out at noon on this day, Ding Gong discussed with Mr. and said that he would take advantage of this time to go, for fear that something would go wrong when the snow melted in a few days. "So I'm here to let you know, if you have anything, you can pack up in advance and leave at noon. The road between Tongzhou and the capital is not far away. Go early. If you ride a horse or a car, you can walk at noon, and you can almost arrive at night." Jiang Xuning nodded in agreement. Just seeing that Xiaobao turned around and was about to leave, he couldn't help but let out a hey, stopped him, and asked, "By the way, where is Master Jiang?" Xiaobao thought that she asked Zhang Sha if he was also leaving, so he said, "Lord Jiang has already known the news, so he naturally went with everyone, but the soldiers who originally came with him may have to wait for the snow to melt before leaving. After all, there are not so many horses." Jiang Xuning was speechless. "I'm asking him where he is now." Xiaobao reacted at this time, thought about it, and didn't seem to be very sure, so he hesitated and said, "I just saw it, because there is still a group of people who want to stay in Tongzhou." It seems that Ding Gong pulled Mr. and the elder to explain some things together, and it may be over there at this time. "Oh, that's not there. I don't know if he woke up this morning and saw what he left last night." Thinking about it, Zhang Sha is too busy to get out of his body now, and Jiang Xuning is not good to bother, so he can only wait to find a suitable time to talk again. She picks up her own things. The rest of the people in Shangqingguan were also busy, preparing the carriage and packing their luggage. Waiting until noon, I had some casual food, but it was just in time to go. Naturally, all the officials in Tongzhou City came, lined up at the door to see each other. Some complimented and thanked him, and some congratulated Xiao Yuan, the Duke of Dingguo, and congratulated him on finding his son-in-law who had been missing for many years. Xiao Yuan stood in front of the person, smiling and looking somewhat reluctant. Xie Wei wordlessly turned his gaze sideways, and then took his actually suppressed gloomy expression into his eyes, and when everyone was about to board the car and set off, he suddenly said, "Grandpa Guo, it is better to walk in front of Xie Mao's carriage." Although his identity has yet to be determined, aside from that layer, he is also a person from the heavenly sect who will be interrogated after returning to Beijing. Tongzhou is making such a big noise. It is inevitable that the Tianjiao side does not want to kill people and kill people. Although the sword book and martial arts around me are superficial, I still know some swords, and if something goes wrong, I can deal with it in time. The carriage was divided into several parts. Ding Gong Xiao Yuan is at the forefront. Jiang Xuning was accidentally involved in the matter of being shortlisted in the heavenly sect, and if the innocent girl's family encounters this kind of thing, it will inevitably ruin her reputation, because the Jingzhong side has always called her sick to the outside world, saying that she is recuperating at home and not going out. If you want to go from Tongzhou at this time, you naturally can't make a big show. Her car is embellished at the end. It seems that Xiao Dingfei has such a special identity, and he is regarded as half a prisoner, and he is also ranked behind. Dingguo Gong Xiao Yuan didn't expect Xie Wei to have such a proposal, his eyelids jumped, and he couldn't help it. There's no need for it, right? The Heavenly Sect Rebellion has been ambushed in this encirclement and suppression, and even if the news will spread out, it won't spread so quickly, and the road is not too long, so there should be no accidents. How not? Xie Wei reminded with a smile. Grandpa Guo forgot, I have checked the list of prisoners who escaped from the prison, and most of them were indeed ambushed together with the Heavenly Sect Rebellion, but some of them ran out a long time ago. Among them, there is a vicious Men Yang, who was still there when he was encircled and suppressed, but after the encirclement and suppression, the corpses were counted but disappeared, but he was afraid that he was pretending to be dead and slipped away. If this person leaks the news, I am afraid that it may not be safe. Men Yang actually ran away? Zhang Xuning couldn't help but be taken aback. Looking back, although this Men Yishi did not agree to her request that day, he also helped Zhang cover when he turned his face with the people of the Heavenly Sect. In this way, although this person ran away, she did not feel righteous indignation that a vicious gangster had escaped. However, Xiao Yuan was stunned by Xie Wei's words, and there was no room for refusal, so he came to his senses and said, but my father was so confused that I almost forgot about it. I also thought that it would be better to live in peace this way, and I wanted to move him to the front, but I was afraid of gossip. It means as if he is impartial and does not open the door because the other person is his son. Everyone understood when they heard it. Xiao Yuan bowed his hand to Xie Wei, since Mr. Xie has made it clear, I didn't think it through, so let his car drive in front. This adjusted the position of the people's cars. Probably having been together for a long time, he was much more familiar than in his previous life, and when Zhang Xuning looked at Xie Wei, he always felt that the flawless smile on his face was very false and fake. It even made her feel that there was a bit of sarcasm hidden inside. She couldn't help but be stunned for a moment. It was about that the gaze was a little obvious. Xie Wei noticed it, and actually glanced back at her, and there was a deep silence in the pupils. Zhang Xuning was suddenly startled, and hurriedly smiled. Xie Wei didn't respond to her, looked at her for a moment, then withdrew his gaze, turned around and bent down to get into the car. The curtain was lowered, and it was separated from everyone. Zhang covered his head a little behind. He seemed to have something on his mind, and he was absent-minded when the people in front of him were talking, and at this moment he was just getting into his own car, and he didn't look away. Zhang Xuning saw it, but in front of so many people, it was naturally difficult to come forward to say hello. When I saw him like this, I thought, did I leave something last night that scared him, or embarrassed him? I was a little nervous in my heart, and I was a little more happy. Xiao Dingfei rubbed his head with the handle of the incense fan in his hand, and when he looked at his carriage, his eyes flashed, but there was no flaw in his smile, and he only said, it's not easy for my son to survive, where can he easily be killed again? As soon as the fan was put away, he only said to Zhang Xuning, when you arrive in the capital, remember what you said. Zhang Xuning looked at him. He jumped into the car in style and said, let's go. Zhang Xuning thought for a while, and then remembered that she said last night that she would cover him when she arrived in the capital, so she also smiled, didn't look at the others, and helped Xiaobao next to her to get into the car. The burden is a small one. It contained 2 pieces of clothing, a wad of unspent silver tickets, and her square seal and a set of carving knives. I was bored on the road, so I just used it for engraving. This is also one of the hobbies that Zhang Xuning learned from Shenju when she was idle and bored in her previous life, but when the car was walking around the city, it was okay, not much swaying, and as soon as she went out of the city and went to the official road, the thin Zuwen knife in her hand trembled a little. What could have been carved in most of the hours was picked all the way. At the end, I turned out the ink and dipped it in the cover to see the effect, but it was not very good looking. It's really embarrassing. If you are in the capital, you can find some rare treasures and give them as a New Year's bundle. Where is there such trouble? Zhang Xuning looked at the mark on the paper, pursed her lips, muttered, and couldn't help but comfort herself. The courtesy is light and affectionate, forget it. At this time, they had already walked halfway, and Xiao Yuan, the Duke of Dingguo, suggested that everyone stop and rest for a while. A fast horse came up from the official road ahead. Everyone was vigilant for a moment, and then they heard the man on the horse wave his hand and shout at them, "The letter from Beijing and the latest newspaper are ordered to be submitted to Mr. Xie." It turned out to be a messenger. Xie Wei didn't go down in person, only Jianshu came forward to take the letter and return to the car to present it. After a while, he came out again, and walked all the way to Zhang Xuaning's car, bent over and said, "Second girl, Mr. got a letter from Jingzhong, please go over and talk." Zhang Xuaning was a little surprised. She was also thinking about when to give the book seal to Xie Wei, but she didn't expect Xie Wei to ask someone to invite her first, so she said, "Wait for a while." I hurriedly wiped the ink base stained with ink, put it into a small printing bag, put it in the sleeve, and then got out of the car. Jianshu took her to Xie Wei's car. Zhang Xuning saluted at the curtain of the car, "Student to meet Mr. What does Mr. Xie command?" Xie Wei's quiet voice came from inside, and he only said, "Come in." Zhang Xuning hesitated, but still lifted the corner of her skirt and boarded the carriage. Jianshu didn't dare to help her, so he only pulled the curtain for her. Zhang Xuning bent in, and saw Xie Wei sitting inside, with a small quadripartite case in front of him, with a thick pile of letters scattered on it, some of which had been dismantled, and some of which had not moved. The carriage was Xie Wei's own, and it was all covered with soft velvet blankets, and there was a hand stove on the side of several cases. The curtains hanging from the windows on both sides are compacted and impermeable. Only behind him made a pane and pasted it with window paper, and a bright light came in. It just shrouded him and illuminated the case in front of him. Zhang Xuning hesitated a little at first sight. Xie Wei lowered his eyebrows and looked at a letter sent from Beijing, and lightly pointed to the left-hand side, "Sit." Zhang Xuning thanked her and sat down in a proper manner. Xie Wei handed over the letter and said, "The letter from Lord Zhang, you can take a look." "Zhang Boyu?" Zhang Xuning took the letter and looked at it carefully, but found that the letter was not written by Zhang Boyu to himself, but to Xie Wei. In the letter, Xie Wei was thanked for his thoughtful planning for this matter, and said that the government had arranged it very properly, but he did not leak the news, and hoped that Xie Wei would take care of it on the way. The other said that the matter was very high, and he did not hide it from the Meng family. Meng is his wife, and Zhang Xuaning's biological mother. Since he has some suspicions about old things, he was furious after knowing that Zhang Xuaning was involved in these things, and even almost fell ill. Recently, the news that His Royal Highness the King of Linzi Shenju has chosen a concubine has come out, and the Ministry of Rights has been ordered to draw up the candidate, and the name of Zhang Xuaning's sister Zhang Suiwei has been ticked. If there is a scandal in the family at this time, it will ruin the reputation of the girl in the family and ruin this good thing, and Meng is afraid that he will be angry with Yuning. It was with a cheeky face to ask Xie Wei and persuade Zhang Xuning to have a few points. When I returned home, I didn't quarrel with my mother, but I lowered my head and endured a little anger, for fear that the house would not be at peace. Things in the inner house have always been difficult to tell outsiders. Zhang Boyu said it in the letter to Xie Wei, which shows that he has great trust in him, and of course there is a layer of Siawei in the middle because of Mr. Zhang Swining, and he feels that Zhang Swining has learned a lot after entering the palace to study, which should be the credit of Siawei. The letter was quite thoughtful for Zhang Swining. However, after reading it slowly, she felt that the original temperature in her heart had also dispersed, like a snowy wilderness outside, cold. Siawei looked at her expression. Do I want to persuade you a few words? Zhang Swining smiled. How can you persuade Mr. Siawei thought about it and said, the affection of parents is not easy to get. If you don't want to give up, you don't have to go for tat. Sometimes when you take a step back and the world is wide, you can get what you want. Take a step back, the world is wide. Zhang Swining closed her eyes and didn't answer, just put down the 2 pages of letterhead. Siawei's email was in the piano case, leaning against the corner. She didn't want to see it, so she remembered the old thing. This situation is somewhat similar to seeing Siawei at the beginning of the year. It's just that at that time, there was no such big and comfortable carriage, just such a simple car, followed by a few noisy servants. At that time, Siawei was not a young master, but a distant relative with a green hairpin in white cloth and a piano at that time. Of course, she was not the current Zhang Swining, just a little girl who had just witnessed Wan Niang's last breath, and went to the capital to see her biological parents with a fear of not daring to be humane. Now he is sitting in the carriage with Siawei. It's still the road to the capital. Sometimes, Zhang Swining feels that she lives like a joke. She really laughed as she thought about it. Only raised his eyes to look at Siawei, and saw that the other party was also looking at him, so he raised his eyebrows and said, Mr. has finished persuading. Siawei saw that she didn't seem to want to deal with others now, so he withdrew his gaze, so as not to make himself look too offended, only picked up the letter on the table, folded it back into the envelope along the original crease, and said with a faint the persuasion is over. Zhang Swining said, the student has resigned. Siawei didn't stop her. Zhang Swining got up, but when she was about to lift the curtain and go out, she remembered what was in her sleeve, so she stopped again, took out the seal bag with the seal, held it in both hands and put it on a few cases, and said, when I passed by last night, I heard that Mr. Wen was resting, and I didn't dare to disturb him. There was no long thing, so he only had time to engrave a book seal, talk about the students' hearts, and Mr. Xie received the grace of karma. It's just that it's a little clumsy, and it's inevitable to laugh generously. Siawei was stunned for a moment. It's just that Zhang Swining's mood is not very high, and after speaking, she bowed again and withdrew from the car. And the seal was placed on a stack of letters. It doesn't look particularly chic from the outside. Siawei picked it up and untied it, and there was indeed a small square seal with a length of 2.5 inches and a width of only an inch. Suddenly, there was an alarmed cold cry outside, be careful, there are people in the forest. It's the voice of the sword book. Siawei raised his eyes and glanced through the gap in the car curtain, and saw that it seemed to be several black shadows in strong suits rushing towards where Xiao Dingfei was, and in an instant, there was the sound of swords intersecting outside the car. He didn't even bother to look at it. Retracting his gaze, he only pinched the small seal and covered it in the palm of his left hand, and the ink mud on the bottom of the seal left a shallow red mark on the clean palm. The owner of the harp hall. Siawei stared at the words in his palm for a moment, smiled steeply, and whispered to himself, it's a little ugly.